Came back for a drive-by. Killed 4 people in the process. When has a gut feeling saved your life? Serious. Lump in my right breast. 43 years old, clean mammogram 5 months earlier. I just knew. 4 different doctors told me it was nothing and to come back in a year. I did not and found a 5th. Yeah, I had to argue my way into being diagnosed with a rare and aggressive form of breast cancer. On the bright side, Thursday was my 5 years all clear date. I was like 8 or 9 when my parents took me and my younger brother to stay the night at my paternal grandparents' house because they were in the middle of divorcing. They lived in a farmhouse that was connected to a barn, with machinery, gasoline tanks, and hay on the ground floor and furnished rooms on the floor above that, and the room we were supposed to stay in was in that barn. As soon as we went into the guest room, I was overwhelmed by panic and felt really dizzy. I turned around and just said that we will not sleep in that room and we spent the night on the couch in the living room instead. Later that night, a gas leak in the barn ignited and almost the entire barn including the guest rooms on its top floor exploded. Maybe I had that weird feeling because the gas had leaked into the room already but no one else felt anything and I'm sure I would be dead if I hadn't noticed it. I was at a pub party being held for my boyfriend's father but I had a headache that wasn't going away. I had been drinking, but I wasn't drunk. I was just feeling like crap. So I made my excuses and left to walk home alone as I didn't want to ruin his night with his dad. It was a 10-minute walk, if that, from the pub to our house and it wasn't properly dark yet. I walked down the street and passed a man sitting on a wall drinking a beer. A minute after I passed, I heard the bottle smash and then footsteps a little while back. Nothing unusual, it was a main road and there was another pub further along but something in my gut was screaming something was wrong. So I hurriedly walked to the pub and stopped outside to ask the smokers for a light and a chat as I smoked. I watched him pass by me, and then stare at me from across the street for an uncomfortable amount of time. With my gut screaming at me, I asked a bouncer working the doors if he could order me a taxi. A few weeks later, while in the town center, I saw a mugshot of the same dude wanted for rape. A similar thing happened to me but I was in middle school. Both my parents were military, and so summer meant some sort of camp or program. Well, I got into some local college programs where young kids study advanced subjects. The day was over before my mom's workday, so I would take the light rail to the library or sometimes to the local CC. Anyway, it was my first time ever really being on my own in a city or in public in general. My parents got me my first cell phone because of all this. They didn't make me scared but prepared. I sort of did the same thing every day. Get off my stop, go get a burger and then go to one place or the other. A couple of times I noticed a man would walk behind me. He'd also at the local quick market by the burger place. He never tried to talk to me or do anything like that, but after the 4th time, I noticed I called my mom and she told me people are just going about their day, on a schedule like I am, so it could just be a coincidence. Well, one day I decided to eat inside the burger place instead of taking it to go. I saw him walking outside and straight towards the way I normally go, but before he got out of the parking lot, he started looking around, like he was looking for someone/something. I went to the restroom, called my mom and told her to get me. I didn't go that way ever again after that, took a new route. About a week or so later the news spoke about a girl who had gone missing and the video footage was from the same strip center as the burger place. Yeah, the suspect was the man who had been following me. When I was around 18, I was on a back road with some friends and a girl I didn't know was driving really fast. Now, I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie, and I have always enjoyed a calculated risk in the name of a good time, but on this occasion, I told her to either slow the fuck down or let me out. I literally had to start screaming at her before she listened and slowed down. A week later she crashed on that same stretch of road at 90 miles per hour, killing her, and the 3 passengers of her car. My husband is a state trooper and has always said the wreck that sticks with him the most was a group of 4 17-18-year-olds in a car speeding on the freeway. One of the kids was screaming and begging the driver to let him out. The driver pulled over and let him out as he and the other 2 passengers made fun of him for being a pussy and not wanting to have fun. A couple of miles later, the driver flew off an overpass, went over the guardrail, and onto the freeway below, killing him and the other 2 passengers instantly and ejecting one out of the car. Luckily there was no one below that they fell onto. My husband always remembers that kid who demanded to get out and how terrified and shaken he was when he walked up on what happened and was able to explain that he was in the car with them just minutes prior and would have been dead had he not been a pussy. My boyfriend's ex's rebound did this to her. He had a fast little car. They were cruising one day, he started laughing. She asked what, he jammed on the gas and started whipping along a mountain while she screamed for him to stop, clawing at the door, hysterically freaking out as the car skidded along the road inches from 100+ foot drops. She told my boyfriend about it. He did what I believe to be the right thing and told her family. They dated for like 4 years, so he knew them and they knew he didn't lie. They banned her from seeing him and reinforced it. He ended up killing himself doing the same thing in the rain. Don't know if gut feeling or lucky coincidence. Decided I should empty the bin on my way to uni, which added maybe 10 seconds to my journey as the skip was 10 feet from my front door. Began my walk to uni and roughly 10 seconds of walking in front of me some idiot from the 3rd floor flat threw a load of glass out his window, smashing all over the path. There was a guy in college who was really into me. And he seemed fine on the surface, very sweet, always helpful and wanting to do things for me, but my gut said this guy was bad news. Vape. Later he went to prison for beating up his pregnant girlfriend, and this killing his child. Went to go catch the bus, saw the bus about to pull out from the stop, and I could have made it if I ran. Something told me not to catch it and just wait for the next one, so I did. Caught the next bus half an hour later. Now, I usually sit at the back of the bus on the driver's side, so that's where I sat. A little way into the journey, traffic was slowing, and we got to the cause of it. A lorry had crashed into the bus I had missed, right into the back on the driver's side. Had I caught that bus, I wouldn't be here. Still gives me chills after 6 years. I think I was 10 or 11, and I was reorganizing my room, moving books and stuff around. I had been working on it all day, and during the process, I moved a bookshelf on top of a dresser to give me more space and loaded it up with 2 encyclopedia sets and a bunch of other books. I ended up moving my bed parallel to the dresser and passed out from working in my room all day. I woke up a little while after 4 and was contemplating getting a glass of water and moving my bed because it didn't look safe under the bookshelf. I finally got out of my bed and walked towards the door, maybe 2 to 3 steps, and boom, 1994 Northridge earthquake hit. The bookshelf instantly fell on my bed. I don't know if it would have killed me, but it would have really smashed me up. I was staying at a friend's house out in the country. He was asleep in another room. I was dozing off with his gigantic pit bull Isabel, sweet girl. In the middle of the night, I am awoken by sounds outside, like scrabbling. Izzy leaps up too, looks at me, then the back door, and growls. My friend at the time had a young daughter, 4 or 5, so I immediately think of her. I grab the nearest weapon, which is a fire poker, and go to open the door as Izzy is beside me, seemingly ready for a fight. But it didn't feel right. I instead bar the door best I can and creep to a window looking out. Outside is a gigantic bear. So big it could easily rip my head off, and it has a few cubes in tow. I watch as it ambles off. I am pretty sure that if I had charged out of that door as I originally intended, and Izzy would not be here today. I was taking my mom to a follow-up appointment from back surgery the month before. The freeway was closed due to a car accident, and Life Flight was called to transport the people injured in the accident. The highway patrol was funneling everyone off of the freeway to the right side exit. I had the strongest feeling we needed to move to the left farthest lane, so I did. No more than a minute after I moved over, a garbage truck came barreling down the freeway and crashed into the car that was in front of us in the other lane so fast that it lifted the front end of the truck and it landed on top of the car. We were in a tiny sports car that would have crumpled like a tin can under the weight of a garbage truck and definitely would have killed my mom and me in a second. I was asleep one night and woke up really having to poop. While I was pooping, an earthquake hit and my dresser fell onto my bed where I would have been sleeping. Don't know if I would have died necessarily, but that gut feeling definitely saved me. I had a similar situation where my dad was going to fix something on the ceiling of my room and had to go into the attic. He had me sit right below where he was going to work so that I could help him find the correct spot in the attic, but I had to go to the bathroom, so I quickly went. And when I came back, my dad had fallen through the ceiling and was sitting in a pile of drywall and insulation in the exact spot where I was sitting. He ended up being pretty much perfectly fine besides a couple scratches and bruises, but if I was still sitting there I probably would have been seriously hurt if not killed, cause I was only in elementary school at the time. My mom knew something was wrong with me when I was younger. Doctor didn't want to see me for another 2 weeks. Mom went into a blind rage over the phone telling them that she was taking me to get checked whether they liked it or not. We got to the GP, he puts a stethoscope on my back and smells my breath. Then says we need to get him to hospital now. Turns out I have type 1 diabetes and if I'd waited another day I would have died. I have a similar story about my sister. She always had pain in her knees and back. My mother took her to a lot of doctors but they all said the same. She is too young for arthritis, it's just growth pain and it will go away over time. My mother knew there was something wrong and she brought my sister to a hospital and got on the doctor's nerves until they checked all the markers. They found the markers. My sister has an autoimmune disease called Wegener's granulomatosis and without help, she would have died after max 7 years of horrific pain. A few years ago I was at a bar with a couple of friends. Everything was good, we were drinking and having fun. All of a sudden, we heard this discussion taking place just a couple of tables from us. 2 guys decided to have a shouting/threat match. I stopped everything to pay attention to them. My friends were making fun of me, saying I was gossipy. One of the guys in the discussion got up and left. Immediately after he left I told my friends we had to go. Now. Let's go now. They didn't get why I was like that. But I'm their friend since forever, they reluctantly agreed. We went to a different bar in a different neighborhood but I couldn't take my mind off of those 2 guys. The next day, the news was talking about a bar fight. Apparently, the guy who got up went home, grabbed a gun and came back for a drive-by. Killed 4 people in the process. My grandpa taught me to never ignore my gut and I couldn't be happier to have listened. I almost killed this guy because he walked out onto the highway. I slowed down because I saw brake lights when there should have been steady flow traffic. I barely had time to hit my brakes and was maybe 8 feet away from him. I rolled down my window and asked him WTF is wrong with him, he just kept walking. Got run over literally minutes after. I can still see his face, his haircut, the clothes he was wearing. A few weeks ago, I had just left my apartment complex and was heading to a friend. I pulled out of my driveway and up to the traffic light and stopped. I was in the left turn lane, the light was red. It was late out and there weren't many people on the road. I watched as the light went yellow, and then red through traffic, one guy ran the tail end of the yellow, like usual. My turn. Light goes green, I have an arrow blinking for me to turn left, I looked both ways and there was no one around, and I just didn't go. I cannot explain what happened other than something inside me just said don't go, so I sat there staring at the green light. A couple of seconds later a car came screaming through the red light, through the intersection, probably doing about 100 kilometers per hour, in the lane I would have been turning into. They were going so fast their vehicle had a bounce to it. If I had turned my car would have been destroyed, and me along with it. I sat there through the whole next light cycle and then turned, pulled over and called my sister. It was a ghostly feeling. I am a light jumper, I look both ways but I am impatient, and I cannot explain what stopped me from going the second that light went green, but I'm glad it did. A pain in the lungs when I inhaled. I've never been stabbed, don't know what it's like but the pain should have been equal to it, if not worse. It had happened before, years ago. Some hot water in the shower and the pain was gone. My wife, then girlfriend, insisted on going to the ER. I insisted on hot water. I feel like we should go and see a doctor, she had said. I was diagnosed with pulmonary embolism on both lungs. The doctor said 1 or 2 more hours and you were gone. So yeah, I owe my wife one. It didn't happen to me but was told by my mom. When she was pregnant with my older sister, she and her family decided to go hiking in the mountains. On the day of the hike, she suddenly felt discomfort and unconformable. So she stayed behind while the rest of her family went for the hike. Her family got lost and if it wasn't for my mom staying behind, they wouldn't have gotten help. Keep in mind that there were no cell phones back then, so if you got lost, it was a lot harder to contact the rescue to come find you. Funny enough, my sister was also born during an earthquake, a different story. I was driving a friend home late at night when I was around 21. She lived in a pretty rural area outside of St. Louis, Missouri, and about a quarter mile from her house was an old abandoned farm and farmhouse. I always thought of this place as non-threatening as she told me she and her 2 sisters would go there as kids and they found an attic full of cool things, including a trunk of vintage women's clothing and old love letters. Like something out of a movie. Anyway, I'm driving her home and it's a hot, humid Missouri summer and we have the windows open as the late night had offered some cool air. We are also singing at the top of our lungs. We pass the abandoned farm and I drop her off at her house. I wait long enough to see she makes it inside and I head back out the way I came. I'm driving along and I get to almost where the farm is and I see two things in the road. My danger meter goes off as I had just driven this road and there was nothing there. I put the windows up and make sure the doors are locked. I get closer and I realize the items are 2 car batteries, spaced out in the road which was basically a 1-lane road, in a way that I would have to get out and move them to drive on the road. I immediately knew I wasn't getting out of the car so I picked the side of the road that had the lesser ditch and I gunned it. I was driving a little SUV and remember feeling the car run over branches and things in the little ditch, but I just gunned it and got out of there. All the way home I felt creeped out and kept checking my rearview mirror. I called my friend the next morning and told her what had happened and we both agreed it was weird. Shortly after that I moved to another state and didn't think much of it after that. Fast forward to 2 to 3 years later when I was back visiting my hometown. I randomly ran into my old friend and she ran up to me with wide eyes and grabbed my arms. She asked me if I remembered what I told her that night. I said yes and she proceeded to tell me that not too long after that had happened her family was awakened in the middle of the night to someone pounding on their sliding glass door. Her dad went to check and saw 2 naked, injured women and let them in and called 911. They had been abducted from St. Louis City about 40 minutes away, by 2 men and brought to the old, abandoned farmhouse where the men tortured and raped them. The women somehow managed to get free and ran to the only light they could see, the light over my friend's garage. They survived, but the men were never caught. There was evidence the men had been going there for a while. My friend was convinced they had put the batteries in the road to lure me out of the car. I'm just really glad my gut told me not to. My now wife and I did the long distance thing in college, and I planned on doing my normal routine to visit her, leave Chicagoland in the morning, get to her early afternoon on Friday. Well, I'm closing my store on Thursday night, and get a feeling I should leave that night. So I said F it and left that night. A little after lunch on Friday, tornado sirens go off. I don't think anything of it until I head back home Sunday, and drive through a town about half an hour north of her. It got lit up by the tornado. I quickly realized that I had left at my normal time. I would have been smack dab in the middle of tornado. I almost got kidnapped once. I was like 23 or so. I was walking down my street at a little after dusk. I saw a van approaching a little ahead, no lights on. Didn't think much of it due to the time of day. The van slowed down and almost started creeping, as I was approaching this part of the sidewalk which had a tall solid wall fence to a community. This gave me some pause in that quick moment. For me to keep walking, I'd have to go between the wall and the van. In the little time it took me to take a couple of steps, and as the van was getting close, I noticed that the side door was slowly sliding open. The one thought in my mind was, why isn't the light turning on inside the van? When you open the door of a vehicle, the light should come on inside it. Unless you deliberately switch that off. And I just ran to the median. I ran in front of the van and across the street. Because if they're gonna have some use of roadkill me, have at it. But they're not getting me in one glorious piece. Immediately, the van took off like someone lit it on fire. From a slow crawl to full speed. As I looked after it to see the plates, I noticed it had no plates. And still no lights. I called the police, of course. They sent cars out and didn't find the van. I never had anything like this happen again and I'm just an ordinary person, so I don't suspect it was targeted. I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. I was driving across the country last summer and was behind a guy and something just didn't feel right. He wasn't doing anything crazy, but the way he was driving just felt off. Slowing down randomly and then speeding up a lot to compensate, wobbling around his lane, occasionally grazing the shoulder, etc. 2-lane highway, so I'm torn about passing him because A, what if he cuts me off or something while I'm doing it, and B, I don't know if I want him behind me but also I don't want to be anywhere near him and passing him and speeding off seems like an okay option. So I see an exit sign and decide I'll just wait it out until then, get gas and hopefully never see him again. Dude then swerves into the left lane and then into the grass median, across the opposing side of the highway, and off into a field. Dude is still driving through this field as I'm passing. No idea what that was about, but he probably would have run into me as I passed him. Thank you for watching Reddit Space. Please subscribe if you love these Reddit stories.